What's the biggest obstacle or setback you feel that each of you has faced personally in your careers?
Yeah.
You don't have to be specific as terms of what project, but just in terms of how you worked through it.
I think it's rarely a setback. It's that you get tired. Sometimes you get tired, and when you get tired, then things start to hit you, and you cannot see a way around. You know, whereas if you got a good night's sleep, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. I think it's the wear and tear, and that's where you really have to say, never get into this life alone. You know, always have somebody to back you up, a friend, or you know, in this case we have a spouse who's a friend.
Well, we also have the table.
When we have, we have the table, which we can talk about in 1 second. But the whole thing is to say, this whole thing about rugged individualism and by your bootstraps, that's just not the way people operate. You know, it's one of my favorite songs is "Lean on Me," and and someday I'll need someone to lean on, and I think that's really true. So it's the day-to-day grind. You know, we hope for something. Sometimes his hopes are higher than mine, so I don't have as big setbacks because I'm always a little more wary than he is, and he'll say, "Oh, this is great. Oh, dear, no." So it's like much, you know, it's a bigger hit when it goes down. But still, it's that, you know, if you don't expect to, if you know there's somebody you can turn to and say, "I'm just down today. It's just I just had a bad day," and someone can say it's okay. You've got the, you know, somebody can just say it's okay. Keep going. That's the big. I'd say just dealing with other people is the trick, and don't lock it down. You were going to talk about the table.
Well, yeah. I mean, we run this round table of writers and directors and actors and producers and editors and composers, etc. That's several thousand people. We've been running it every Thursday for 24 years, and it's to create a compassionate community in Hollywood. And now we have offshoots all over the country. And again, it was because I wanted to create the Hollywood I wanted to live in. And Hollywood can be very corrosive, it can wear you down. You have to really be very careful of who you're giving judgment to, who's in judgment of you, where you internalize that. Because if it's people who are hateful, who are toxic, who are cruel, that can destroy you. And so you have to surround yourself with people who are loving, people who are kind, and it's hugely important. And because at the end of the day, you have to build a life. The life is ultimately more important than this script or this project or any of it. You have to have a life where you're loved and you're loving, where you have people who, as Elaine said, when you falter, will be there for you. And again, it has to be, you know, lean on me is good if it's going both ways. It isn't like, well, let me drain your life force and leave you an empty husk, you know, which is what some people do, you know. And so you have to make sure that it's reciprocal, and that's what we, with the roundtable that we run, that's what we teach, and even the classes we teach where we mentor people. What we often say is, your career will be defined by 2 poles: what you stand for and what you won't stand for. But you have to know what those 2 things are. And a lot of people, particularly actors can end up being very successful but feeling very empty because they're doing roles that are not in alignment with what they themselves believe. And so you have to decide, well, what do I believe? What is meaningful to me? And then how can I do work that speaks from that and speaks to that? And
because they can, there's a habit of executives who are not artists to sort of project, who the hell are you, you know? And it's very hard to answer that, but if you know what you stand for, like if you say, what I take a stand for, the message that I'm going to give is that as long as you keep trying, as long as you're in the game, then you're a hero. You know, let's say that's what you want to stand for. And if I say, well, who the hell are you? You say, I'm the person who stands for this message, and it's an important message. And they can't get to you in that way if you really are clear on what you stand for. But sometimes it's always hard, and the good thing about, like, at the table, let's say you've made, you advertise, I made 5 calls, and it's 5 no's. But then you're getting applause for having picked up the phone 5 times, and that you're going to make 5 more calls the next day. You get applauded for going, you know, you're going in the game, you're still fighting on. And I think that we all sort of need that, to say, hey, I made 5 calls, I'm going to make 5 calls tomorrow. It's okay, that's what it takes. It takes 100 calls to get the 1 yes, but I'm going to make those 100 calls. I'm going to get that yes. And it's very interesting if you track how people have struggled, that my favorite films, if you listen to the filmmakers, well, it took them 10 years to get it mounted. It took, lots of insults. It took people, battering them down, but they ended up making something brilliant, which a lot of people didn't see, but they saw, and then they gifted me with it.
Yes.
So I think that it's more realistic to say, hey, let's applaud each other for the effort.
But, and also, there was a question that was asked earlier about, well, Space Command's taken 5 years so far, and but the lovely part is we now have a completed rough cut of the first 2 hours, and we're generating the visual effects on the first 2 hours now, and so we get to watch the story beginning to end, and it's a wonderful story, and the actors are quite wonderful, and the performances are great, and the story is meaningful. So that's very heartening as well. There's a very interesting dividing line between when you have the footage and when you don't. Before you shoot, before you have the footage in the can, everything can conspire to have the thing not exist. So if you stop before you've actually shot the film or the pilot or whatever it is, then it's in great danger of never existing. The moment you shoot, the moment you've got it in the can, then it simply becomes bringing assets to bear to finish. Then it's just about visual effects, color correction, sound design. Those are very doable, but you've got the story. It exists. It's like if you write a novel, if you finish the novel, at least there's a book that's beginning to end, and then you can refine it.
No one will know how long you took to write it.
Yes, to write it. But it's very important to finish what you start. Because first of all, if you finish what you start, you can finish what you start. And again, another enemy is perfectionism. You don't want to have perfectionism stop you from starting or stop you from finishing. It's very important to finish things and then refine. Ray Bradbury, who was my mentor for over 10 years, when he wrote, he would describe it as vomit, then mop, which means you write, you pour it out, then you refine it, but you start by pouring it out without judgment. And in his youth, what he would do is he would sit down on a Monday, write an entire short story in one sitting, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday he would refine it, Friday he would mail it off, and then Monday he would start all over again. He was writing 50 stories a year, and an amazing output. And actually he kept the same writing schedule for over 70 years. He was an amazing man, and a great inspiration. I was very lucky that I got to know him, and I'd go over to his house once a month for over 10 years, and we just talk about life and art and career. And I'm actually writing a book now called My Ray Bradbury that's about my friendship with Ray, because he told me many things that were never in print, never published. And I'm thrilled to be able to share that.
And of course, a few key members of our team told us not to start shooting on our start time for Space Command.
Oh yeah, well that's, again, sometimes you have to be very careful of listening to people who are faint of heart, because a big part of finishing anything is having the daring to start. Because again, once something is in existence, once it's in motion, momentum is enormously helpful. Because then people see the train is moving, and then they often want to jump on board because something's actually happening. A lot of people, they're all talk. A lot of people flake. You really have to look around you and say, okay, who finishes what they start? Who actually is serious about this? And affiliate with those people. Because there's an energy that leads towards success, and there's an energy that leads toward failure. And you really have to be mindful of that and observant. And again, this is why I've surrounded myself with, last night at the table, I was mentioning that I collect showrunners. Now, the showrunner is the executive producer who runs a network show. But I do collect these people. I do get to know, like, if someone's doing a show that I love, I'll reach out to them. I'll go to an event. I'll meet them. And then we form a friendship. And a lot of these people are my mentors. They're my advisors. They're my friends. And it goes both ways. So they'll ask me for advice. It's funny, I was having lunch a few weeks with a dear friend of mine who's run a number of shows. He's also a very talented director and writer. And he had just sold a pilot, and he just couldn't get the story to work. So he said, listen, is it okay if I ask you and just walk through this with you? And so we talked, and he said, this is what the story is, but here's all the things I don't know. And I said, oh, well, that's easy. And I just said, okay, here's how it goes. And within about, 20 minutes, we totally worked the thing out. But he had the courage and the confidence in himself to be able to say, I don't know how this goes, and can you help me? And he's not paying me, I'm not being hired, and that's fine. It's a two-way street.
That was the great thing about Shakespeare in Love.
Yes, what?
Well, Shakespeare went to another writer to ask to work through a story point in
that's
the
funny.
film Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, that's very funny.
And so we both really like that story point, because any writer knows that you end up frequently bouncing something
off other people.
Yeah.
Yes, because again, it's not about being perfect. It's about getting the job done.